Babe.
What'd you do?
Rotate. Oh. Okay. It said something about you can't turn your phone while you're recording.
Oh, we can't. Stop. Can't do that. Good thing.
Did you start it?
Yep.
No, this isn't what's doing it.
You would be the only one in the video.
Because it's tall.
You can slide it. But for now. Go ahead.
Good morning, Redemption Church!
Good morning.
There's a few of you in here, right? Hey, welcome, welcome, welcome. For those of you watching us online, welcome as well. I'm going to start off with just a few announcements, and then we'll get into the message for you this morning. Welcome, we're glad you're here, but you're not here. Easter's coming up. We don't know what we're going to do for it because we want to celebrate with you. We're excited to celebrate the birth. See, we were talking about Christmas this morning here, for those of you that aren't here. We were talking about Christmas for some reason, so it's on my mind. Anyway, guys, 4 ways to give, right? There's not 4 ways anymore. However, you are still able to give. You can give online still, or you can write your check and send it to P.O. Box 155. Again, I'm just going to continue to pound the drum, right? There's never been a greater need. We've never reached more people as a church than we are right now. So, first fruits, right? Eric and I have been kind of talking about that and praying. Like, most of us still have our jobs, right? So we should continue to be generous towards God and towards others as we try to advance the mission of Jesus. So we're going to pray this morning, and we are going to get into a little different message than I was planning on preaching, but the Spirit really laid something on my heart this week that we're going to roll with. So, Jesus, thank you so much that you are alive and well, that you are in full control of everything that's going on. God, I pray for protection for the people in our city, our church family, the people in this country, and the people in this world. May you guide the leaders that are making some really tough decisions that they've never had to make before. God, would you guide the pastors in this country and in this world that they're trying to navigate waters they've never had to do. They're trying to pastor and shepherd and keep their churches connected in ways that they've never been taught, but they're trying to learn this on the fly. So, God, whatever happens this morning in this building, I pray it extends out into the homes, into the families, into those people that don't know you, into their lives, so that their lives can be changed and transformed by the gospel of Jesus. So we give this service to you. We give everything that happens to you to make you more famous in our city and in our country and in our world. So we love you and we pray this all in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
I think I had another slide here. Hold on, guys. It's all right. I think the next slide was, it's the Zoom. So the last couple weeks, guys, we've been really trying to get Zoom groups going. I know that sounds weird and I know it's kind of quirky, but we want to connect as a church family. So I'm taking the lead on it now as far as setting it up. We're going to do one big Zoom group. Zoom holds up to 100 people. Okay, you can have 100 little screens on the screen. So I'm inviting you to join us this afternoon around 2 o'clock. I'm going to put a Zoom link up on Facebook, and we want our church family to connect. We want to see your faces because I know that I've talked to a lot of you this week. I'm really kind of like, it hit me on Thursday, and Friday was worse, and yesterday was the worst. Like, I'm missing you guys very much. So I would like to see your face, okay? I've talked to most of you on the phone, but I'd like to see your face. So 2 o'clock this afternoon, we invite you to join us on a Zoom call. If you've never done it, there's plenty of us that have had to learn how to use it, so please reach out to us via Facebook Messenger, texting, whatever that looks like. So, guys, this morning, I want to spend a little time teaching you before I preach to you. There's a difference. Teaching to you is teaching to your mind. Preaching to you is what I like to do, right? That's what I do every Sunday for you. I'm preaching to your heart. I'm preaching to your soul. I'm looking for gospel transformation from what I'm teaching you. But let me say this. Everyone turn to Luke 12. We're going to be in verses 22 to 34 this morning. We believe the Bible here at Redemption. We are a Bible-believing church. We believe the Bible is true, and we believe that it's not just true like some crossword puzzle, right? It's true in a very personal and practical way. And because the Bible is timeless for every person, every time, every place, right? We can open the Bible no matter where we're at, no matter how many people are there, no matter if we're gathered as a church or not, okay? We can open the Bible and we can receive truth. We can receive helpful and practical truths, okay? And the only way that can happen is getting to know Jesus. Jesus is our example of how to live life, right? He's our instructor of how to live a good life. He's our example of how we should treat others. And we can only do this by learning to follow his example by what? By reading our Bibles, okay? And this is really important in this day and age, right? Particularly today, right? Because Jesus, this morning, from our text, is going to talk about two things: fear and anxiety. There's a lot of fear and anxiety right now. And I'm hopeful that I can give you some hope that you don't need to have as much fear and anxiety as you probably are experiencing this morning, all right? So turn to Luke 12. All right, we're not going to read it together because you guys aren't here, right? But I'm going to kind of jump all over this passage this morning, all right? The first thing I want to talk about is fear in the mind. I'm going to start with one of three questions based on Jesus' teaching. Number one is, what does your mind fear? What does your mind fear? Who are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Because Jesus says this in Luke 12:32. Fear not, little flock. Fear not. This is the most frequently uttered command in the entire Bible. The first 5 books of the Bible alone have 613 commands of fear not. And if you take the totality of the Bible, right, there's 66 books in the scriptures, and you pull out every single command, the one that is repeated the most frequently is fear not. How many of you, right, you're hearing this and that surprises you? Because the Bible was written a long time ago. But one thing is always consistent. People are what? They're governed by their fears. Okay? So Jesus says, fear not. Now what Jesus doesn't say, it's important that you see this, because this is where us as humans go. What it doesn't say is don't plan and don't prepare. See, some of us, right, we're just lazy and we're irresponsible and we're immature, right? You say, that's why I don't make a budget, that's why I don't pay my taxes, that's why I don't have health insurance. Jesus says, fear not, so like I just don't fear. You should fear a little bit, right? Because the Bible talks a lot about planning as well. There's this book called Proverbs, okay? Much of it's about wisdom, how to live a life of storing up for your children, for planning, for preparing, for strategizing, for anticipating what might happen in your future, right? And some of you this morning are very irresponsible in the ways that you live your life, and you should consider yourself very immature, not mature, right? We were joking this morning, if this check from President Trump comes, right? How many people are we going to see that still don't pay their mortgage, but they have a brand new purse, right? It's going to happen because they're immature. They're not fearful, right? We live in an age where someone will always bail me out, right? I can get this new purse because my mortgage company will help me. Maybe, right? Maybe not. Maybe you need to meet someone that God gave the gift of administration to, right? And they can sit you down and you can think about your future and your children's futures and maybe your children's future, right? And you can get a plan together for life. But what I'm not saying is fear it, right? Don't freak out about life. Don't stress over it. Do all you can to live wisely and trust God with the details, right? Because only God can take care of most of our situations, right? The goal is to be ready for the future. The goal is to trust God so that you can enjoy it as it approaches, right? Now, what is fear? This is just a flat definition, right? Fear is a response to danger that is real or perceived. The second word is important, perceived, okay? It doesn't need to be like a real fear, really scary, right? That's the whole point of like Halloween, right? We try to like scare kids, adults. The point is to freak people out. Are they really in danger? No, they're not in real danger, okay? It's a perceived danger. It's a perceived to be potentially real danger. That's where fear comes from. And everyone watching this morning fears. What do you fear? Do you fear sickness? Do you fear death? Do you fear death by burning, by drowning? Do you fear public speaking? Do you fear being single? What do you fear? Because everyone fears something or someone, and too many of us, I want you to see this morning, fear way too many things. And you can hear this command this morning. I wrote this in my notes. You can hear this fear as, do not fear. And that can sound like really religious and not very helpful, right? It comes off as a command. Or you can shut your eyes and hear Jesus giving you an invitation that says, fear not. Don't fear, right? Jesus' words aren't stern. Fear not, little flock, right? Because that doesn't make sense. That doesn't go with the character of Jesus, right? Because if it was stern, it would be Jesus saying, fear not, little puny one, right? And then you're like, that's why I'm freaking out, because I'm puny, okay? It's an invitation from Jesus this morning to live your life in a fearless reality, right? Jesus is inviting you, saying, fear not. Fear not, my child. So who are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? And we're going to unpack this morning, okay? Because fear begins in the mind, and I just want to give you a few insights on facing fear. And the first one is fear is vision without optimism. Fear is vision without optimism. Some of us are visionaries, right? We know where life is going. We've made a plan. We think we know where our health is going, right? We know where our relationships are going. We know where our job is going, okay? We have this idea of what's next. We can see down the road. But so many of us don't have any optimism. So we're fearful, right? Oh my gosh, that could go bad, and that could go bad, and this job could go sideways, and that could hurt, and that could fail, okay? Fear seems reasonable to us, even when it's irrational. How many of you this morning have irrational fears? Right? People are going to try and reason with you, and it won't make any difference, because the fear in your mind is like, I could tell you you're being crazy, and it's a real fear to you, even though it's irrational, because you're afraid of it. Let me give you some examples. This is kind of going to be an intense sermon this morning, so I just want to take a quick emotional break. A few minutes in already, okay? Here are some of the irrational fears people have. I don't even know if I'm going to say these right for you guys watching. Coulrophobia. It's a fear of clowns. Actually, it's a diagnosis. And I'll tell you, clowns don't scare me, but if I see a clown at night, it's scary because clowns at night are never a good thing. This is fine. How about this one? Does peanut butter scare you? If you do, if it does, you may have, arachibutyrophobia. It's the clinical definition, I'm not making these things up, of fear of peanut butter sticking to the roof of your mouth. Okay? How about this one? Germanophobia. The fear of German people. That's a real bummer if you're German like me, right? So I'm afraid of myself. Okay? How about homilyophobia? Fear of sermons. Some of you are like, hey, that's why I don't come back to church, right? That's why he preaches too long. I actually have a fear. It's a diagnosis, right? Just laugh, right? I'm not going to apologize this morning for trying to make you laugh. We need some more laughter right now, all right? But let's get back to the text. Here's what fear's about, and I've observed this through counseling and pastoring and loving on people and dealing with their lives, including my own, right? Fear is one of three things. The first one is not getting what we want, okay? So your hope is stuck on something like what? I want to get married, but I don't think I'm going to get married, right? I'm fearful. We want to have kids, but we can't have kids. Fearful, right? I want this job, but I'm not going to get the job. Fearful. So what happens, right? The fear comes in. How will I go on if I don't get it? All right? The second one, getting what we want and losing it. I think that's where a lot of people land. Okay? There's this fear that's why sometimes in life, success is more fearful than failure. Right? Yay, we got married. Oh, what if we get divorced? Yay, we're pregnant. Oh, what if we miscarry? Right? Yay, the kid was actually born. Oh, what if he dies? Right? Or what if they don't love God? It's a fear of getting something your heart longs for and then losing it. Second fear. Okay? And your third one is getting what you don't want. Okay? I got cancer. I don't want it. Right? I got fired. Yeah, that's not what I wanted either. My spouse left me. I didn't really want that one either, right? Fear reveals our values, our loves, our priorities, our longings, right? Because you only fear losing what you what? Love. If you don't care about something, you don't care if you lose it, right? You only fear getting what you hate, right? It reveals a lot about us. It's essential to us. It's primary to us. What we fear is, it affects us, okay? Think about it this morning. What are we fearful of right now as a country? We're not going to sugarcoat it, right? I can't even go to the grocery store. I'm going to get COVID-19 and I'm going to die, right? I'm here to tell you that even though it's just on Facebook and it's a very rare case, right? I saw it a couple days ago. A 104-year-old man celebrated his 104th birthday a day after being healed from COVID-19. If a 104-year-old can make it, I think most of us that go to this church, we're okay. Right? His immune system's probably not quite as good as mine. What are you afraid of this morning? Why are you afraid of it? I've said this to you guys before. I've said it to you on the phone. What if you do get it? What if you do die? You know where you're going if you know Jesus.
Amen.
But you're afraid of what? What you're going to lose. I think God is using this time, this season, to remind his followers, to remind his children that we can't lose the greatest thing we already have. Again, I've used this example before, but my boys know that there may come a day, right? As a parent, you would never want to bury your children, but I want my children to bury me someday, right? But they know that Dad's not always going to be around. But they know where I'm going. And they know they'll be with me forever. Okay? And let me point out, you're silly if you're not fearful. If you don't have any fears, okay? That's silly. But I need to tell you that every fear is an opportunity for you to either run to or run from God as your source of comfort and hope and help. And that's where we're at this morning, right? Because if you don't take care of fear, it goes to my second point this morning as I'm teaching you right now still. It turns into anxiety in the body. How many of you have anxiety right now with everything going on? Right? I'm in the minority most of the time, but I'm not even afraid of this right now. I'm actually excited and encouraged by this season. But we're anxiety ridden because we're so fearful, right? It's such an enormous issue. It manifests itself in the body as something called anxiety. The number one category of prescription medication in the United States is what? Antidepressants. Why? Because one of the biggest issues that people report is sleeplessness. Why? Because people are anxious and people are stressed and then they're freaked out and they're struggling, right? People, especially in our country, are taking less of their vacations than ever. They're bringing their phones and laptops to stay connected to all their responsibilities because they're so afraid of not having control, right? Or not being in the loop on something that we as Americans especially cannot even take a break. And maybe God is using this season for most of us that are working from home at this point for us to take a little bit of a break. Right? If you can't take a break, you have something called anxiousness. Okay? And Jesus is the wonderful counselor that he is, and he's talking to us about these things because he really does love us. He really does want to help us. He really does want to serve us, and he wants to give us help so we what? We don't freak out. So here's what Jesus has to say. And here's my second question for you this morning. My first was, what do you fear? My second one was, when does your body manifest anxiety? When do you start to get anxious? Because fear starts where? I already said it this morning, right? Fear starts in the mind. Anticipating the future and being freaked out about it. But then it manifests itself in the body. And God has designed our bodies in such a way as to give us these clues about our mental state, right? And the guy writing this book that we're in this morning is Luke. Okay, he's a doctor. He's a medical physician. He's reporting what Jesus is teaching. And here's what he says. Look at verse 22 with me. Luke 12, verse 22 says, do not be anxious about your life. That's a huge category. Do not be anxious about your life, right? Some of you say, what about my finances? Life. What about my marriage? Life. What about my health? Life. You name it, it's your life, right? It's your life. Anything in life is something that could potentially produce fear-based anxiety and lead you to anxiety, anxiousness. Look at verse 25, a couple verses later. He says this, which of you being anxious, we in America call it stressed, okay? Which of you being anxious can add a single hour to his span of life? right? A single hour. I'm a big basketball fan for those of you that know me, right? A couple months ago, Kobe died, right? His plane, I can't remember the exact number, but was like 200 feet. His helicopter was 200 feet from getting to safety. Kobe Bryant, one of the best basketball players in the world, couldn't add a single minute, let alone a single hour to his life. Why do you think you can? Why do you think you can? Jesus himself couldn't add a single moment to his life because he knew he was in God's will. And it's not like he could have been like, God, can I just have a few more minutes on this cross because it's fun, right? Do not be anxious about adding a single hour to your span of life. Here's what Jesus is saying. I don't want you to be anxiety-ridden with COVID-19 this morning. Why? Because you're going to hurt yourself. I'm not going to physically hurt myself. Just wait. You're going to reduce the quality and the duration of your life. You're actually, hear me, you're actually going to shorten your lifespan if you're ruled by fear and anxiety. Is that true? Do you believe that this morning for those of you watching, right? Does Jesus know what he's talking about? How many of you go to the doctor and you're like, I want to live a really long time? And the doctor's like, the key is stress. I'm not like, that will definitely, you will have a long life. You'll see your great-great-grandchildren, right? You'll live to be 150 years old, okay? Fear in the mind leads to anxiety in the body. Here's what happens. When fear in the mind results in anxiety in the body, the brain signals the release, I'll get a little nerdy here, the brain signals the release of the pituitary and adrenal hormones, okay? There's this thing in your brain, it controls your emotions, called the hypothalamus. It kicks on, your body becomes alert, okay? And you're on, right? You're ready, okay? And your systems start to fire. It's kind of like putting the key to the car in the ignition. Everything starts up, everything's firing. But the problem is, in our world, we live in a world that's always on. We never shut down. We're always in this state of perpetual stress, okay? We're not anti-media here, but a lot of you watching need to stop watching the news because things change every day. And then one day's a really good day, and then 6 days are really bad. Like, you're in a cycle of perpetual stress. And what happens is, when we're in this, okay, what happens to you? You usually get mood swings, anger, stress, depression. How many of you are doing very well right now, right? And those of you that are parents have kids at home too, so that adds on top of it, right? A pastor buddy of mine, I talked to him this week. And I've done this before, so I'm not making fun of him. He was literally on a run trying to clear his mind, and he stopped on the side of the road and sat down and started sobbing. He doesn't know why. Right? Because his emotions were just out of control. And we've all been there at one point or another, right? And we're all living there right now to some extent. Sometimes it's just exhaustion. How many of you have woke up? Did I even go to bed? Right? The average American is sleep deprived. How many hours a day are we supposed to get of sleep? The doctors say 8 to 10, right? 10 does seem like a lot, okay? The average person gets less than 6, right? So what does that mean? It means you're putting your health, right? Like, you're trying to control your health with things like coffee, right? How about disassociation or checking out? How many of you get to the end of the day and you're like, what did I even do today? Right? Did I even get anything done? How many of you that have to, like, currently we don't have to, right, but have had to commute? I used to have to commute about 75 miles every day. And there was days that I would get home and go, I don't know how I got home. Because your brain checks out. That's how awesome God made your body, right? How many of you have insomnia right now? You can't sleep because you're so nervous. So what do you start to do? You start to self-medicate with alcohol, right? Because that would get you to come down, in theory, right? But then the alcohol negatively affects your sleep, okay? Or how about tobacco, because you're trying to calm your stress and you're trying to calm your system down? Well, that just leads to high blood pressure, right? Or how about junk food, because maybe the cupboards are full and I'm stuck at home, right? And that leads to unhealthy eating. We're trying to regulate our body systems. Irritability. How many of you are there? Some of us as parents, I'll admit some days. Everything annoys you and makes you mad. Everything.
Amen.
Physical symptoms. Irritable bowel syndrome, headaches, heart trouble, chronic sickness, stomach troubles. Like, you're so stressed out that you don't have, like, any regular systems going in your body. And pretty soon, everybody starts to feel like yet another burden to God, right? And God seems really far away, and that's anxiousness. And Jesus says, if you have anxiousness, you are reducing the quality of your life, and you're actually killing yourself. You're actually killing yourself. Now, I'm not for a moment downplaying that there will be seasons of anxiety and stress, and we are currently living in one. Okay, life in a fallen world, right, is inevitably going to include these type of things. But particularly when they become consistent and they can become constant, right? That's the process when we start to begin to really self-destruct and kill ourselves. Okay? That's our whole culture, right? Let me take it more personally, because it really scares me, this culture we have in America, let alone, I'm going to go real personal and say the culture of the church, right? Forbes magazine a couple years ago, most of you have told you this stat, the profession of pastor was the #2 most stressful job. I think CEO was one. But like, you wouldn't think that, right? And I've told many of you, I love being a pastor, I'm blessed by it, but it's the 150-pound jacket that I cannot ever take off. I'm always thinking about you guys, I'm always worried about you guys, I'm always praying about you guys. And as Eric and I were kind of reflecting because of all this downtime we've had a little bit, right? Most of the older pastors that have been in my life have had significant health problems. And it's like, shoot, when's my body going to go off the cliff? Right? Because pastors, good pastors, they live off this high. They live off of working hard, and they live off this pressure because it's what? It's all in the name of Jesus. Like, it's why I do it. Which it is, right? But then we go in our closet with just Jesus and me, and it's fear of failure, fear of the critics, fear of finances, fear of success, fear of failure, fear of expectations, fear of demands, and we become completely overwhelmed. So, like, your pastor, your friend, is like the chief sinner in this, okay? A lot of times I'm completely overwhelmed. And then what do we start thinking? Right? If that's how I feel, is that the culture of sickness and death that I'm leading my church in? Now, many of you know my story that from when Eric and I planted our first church. I was finishing seminary, working a full-time job, had a newborn baby, and was planting a church. And one day, Eric and I sat back because I was completely exhausted and I was on the edge of burnout, and I was working 90 hours a week. I wasn't loving my family well. I wasn't pouring into myself like with my shake reading that I needed, right? I wasn't listening to what Jesus was saying. So friends, how wonderful is it that we can talk to Jesus about these kind of things? And you know what? He's listening. And you know what? He's sympathetic. Here's what's wonderful about Jesus, the God that we serve at this church. Unlike all other religions, right? All other views of God, where God is super far away, right? And he's never been here. God says what? Fear not. Well, that's easy for you to say. You're Jesus, right? You're in heaven getting worshipped by the angels. That's really different than living here on the earth as a sinner in a crooked, fallen world, right? Where COVID-19 is running rampant. So what did our God do? He came into human history. God becomes a man. His name is Jesus. And in Hebrews it says, we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with us in our weakness. Why? Because he gets it. He's been here.
Amen.
And the world doesn't look that much different than it did when Jesus was here. Again, I always joke about it, but go read 1 Corinthians. So when Jesus is talking about fear and anxiety, who could possibly have greater fears available to them than Jesus? Jesus is going to go to the cross and take care of the entire human history's sin. Think about that. Thousands of years ago, he died for you. Jesus had some difficulty in life. Jesus did have some distress. And he works through it with the Father in prayer, which is what we should be doing even more than ever in this season. All of us have a little more free time than we usually do. We should be spending more time in our Bibles, in prayer, and with our families than we've ever had. This is a wake-up call from God. That's why in the Garden of Gethsemane, right, Jesus, before he dies, he's literally sweating drops of blood. He's anticipating his own execution and his murder. How many of you have to worry about that tomorrow? He can sympathize with you. When Jesus says, fear not, he understands what it's like to suffer. Suffer physically, mentally, emotionally. He understands what it's like to die. He understands what it's like to have people destroy your reputation. He knows what it's like to have your family turn their back on you, to have an entire town, right? Turn your back on you. He knows that when his friend, he couldn't depend on his friends in the garden. Why? Because he said, stay awake with me while I pray. Because I just need my friends, and what did they all do? They fell asleep. When he needed them most, they took a nap. Jesus knows what it's like to have someone sabotage your life, to steal from you, to betray you. His name was Judas. And he turned Jesus in to be killed. And Jesus still loved him and served him until the day he left. Jesus knows what it's like to be single and alone. For those of you that are single and alone this morning, right? At this point, Jesus, he's broke and he's homeless and he's heading toward the cross. So isn't it wonderful that Jesus isn't just this another religious guy in a cushy, comfy life, right? Because that's all other religions, okay? So we can't go to those gods because they don't understand. That's not our Jesus. We should love this Jesus. So when Jesus says, again, fear not, okay, you understand. You're not just giving me something to do, Jesus. You're trying to lead me in a new way of life that's good for me because you loved me. That's our Jesus. Jesus goes on in this passage. He goes in a completely different direction than anyone would have seen coming. Okay? Every self-help book you ever read is about what? Paying attention to yourself, getting to know yourself, loving yourself, taking care of yourself, and to some degree, that's important, right? The Bible does say the body is a temple, okay? You should steward your body, you should steward it towards a good life. But what Jesus does is he redirects all focus away from ourselves, and he says this. You know what? You know what part of the problem is? If all you ever think about, right, is fear and anxiety, and if you would just start thinking about the Father and those in need, okay, it'll completely alter the way you face your life every day. See, part of the problem is, if I worship me, then learning to worship me better, what? Only makes me more fearful and anxious. Because I'm going to let myself down a lot. So Jesus' third question this morning is, where's your treasure? Your money, your possessions, right? It's like, are you kidding me? In the middle of all this, we're talking about that? Yeah, Jesus goes to your stuff. Why? Because you're freaking out right now. This morning. To some degree or another, you're freaking out. What about my car payment? What about my house payment? What about my job? What about my credit cards? Right? What about my giving? What about the poor? And then you're sitting there wrestling in your mind going, is this just yet another thing of being a follower of Jesus, that Jesus is trying to take my stuff? And Jesus says, I'm not trying to take your stuff. I'm trying to take your stress. And a lot of your stress, right? Jesus is looking us firmly in the eye saying, a lot of your stress is connected to your stuff. Think about that, guys. It is. Here's what it says. Let's unpack it. Luke 12:23. I'm going to start to preach for you guys now. All right, I'm about to cut about this. For life is more than food. Really? How many of you food is a big deal? Jesus, right here, isn't saying don't eat. I would recommend you eating. Okay? It's kind of a big part of seeing tomorrow. All right? But what he's saying here is that food, to many, can become all-consuming. And in these times, we've talked about this as we've been going through John, right? These people in Jesus' time, they had food for what? A day at a time, okay? For us, it's a different problem. Their concern was starvation. What's ours? Obesity. In America, I looked them up yesterday, because we have plenty to eat, right? Even in the midst of this pandemic, our shelves are relatively full, right? 42% of Americans are overweight. Half of our country is fat. That's crazy. Right? That's crazy. There's other places in the Bible where a guy named Paul, he says our stomachs have become our gods. How many of us, when we're happy, we reward ourselves with food? How many of us, when we're stressed, we reward ourselves with food? Right? When the relationship goes sideways, food. When I'm stressed, food. Right? I'm stressed, I need comfort. Don't go to like this guy called the Holy Spirit, who's called the Comforter, right? Just go to the fridge. Okay? I don't want to go to God. The fridge looks more enticing, right? And I'm not saying it's bad to enjoy good food, right? God's a good God. God gives good gifts, right? But are you expecting something from food that you can only get from Jesus? Life is more than food, the text says. And the body more than clothing. Let's be honest. You know life is not about clothing. But how many of you, life is really about clothing? I have to wear the right clothes, right? And in the fashion world, these clothes only last for about a few months, and then I have to get like more clothes and new clothes and better clothes, okay? And I have to go shopping again. And again, is it a sin to wear clothes? No, if you were here with us this morning, the 3 people I'm looking at right now have clothes on. I'm glad. That would be a little awkward. But how much of your time, this is not just to the ladies, how much of your time is put forth presenting yourself as someone you're not? Because that's what we do with clothes, right? We want to look good when we get together. We want to look like, listen to me, we want to look like we're fine. Everything's okay, right? Minnesota Nice. How are you? I'm good. Well, are you great? No, actually, I'm freaking out, and I was just hoping that you'd look at my jeans and not my face. Because I can't do it anymore, right? The text goes on. It says, consider the ravens. And now you're like, what? I have never read this anti-stress book. The ravens, right? Chapter 4, nasty birds. Ravens are on that list of like unclean, gross animals. They're like scavenger animals. I've read it years ago somewhere, but like you actually can't even kill, like, it's one of those animals that can't get hit by a car because they're so smart. But they're so stupid because they eat like garbage and dead animals, right? But Jesus says, consider the ravens. Okay, consider what? The text says, they neither sow nor reap. Did you know that ravens aren't farmers? Okay? The text goes on. They have neither storehouse nor barn, yet God does what, right? He feeds them. These unclean, nasty, vile birds, he feeds them. Here's the point. Some of you this morning feel like a raven. I'm just dirty, I'm nasty, I'm vile, and you know what? God loves you and he feeds you. And if God's going to feed a raven a nasty bird, right, he loves us way more than nasty birds. We bear his image, right? A raven doesn't bear God's image. We do. So he is willing and more than glad to help you. Go back to the text. Of how much more value are you than the birds? Thanks, Jesus. That's nice that you say I'm more valuable than a bird. And which of you, being anxious, there's that word again, can add a single hour to his lifespan? There it is again. If you're not able to do as small a thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest? Here's what our Jesus is saying. There's some stuff that you just can't control. Right? Now see, we believe here in the sovereignty of God, that God rules and reigns over everything, okay? And he does that through the authority he's given to Jesus Christ. And what he's saying here is, there's so much more out of your control than you can ever imagine. Now, it's not a sin to anticipate the future, right? As a good steward, prepare for it, okay? But if you're trying to control it and you're fearful and you have anxiety about it, you're in a position that is reserved for God, and that is not good for you. It's not good for you this morning. What are you worried about that is really should be in the hands of God? Because Jesus is saying, if it's out of your hands, don't be fearful, be faithful. And we have a lot of fear right now in our world and not a lot of faith. The Bible goes on. It says, consider the lilies. What? This is like the weirdest passage ever. We talk about nasty birds. Now we sound like the college I went to, a liberal arts college, like this community college prof who smokes a lot of weed or something like that. Consider the lilies. Okay, that's what he says. This is from a construction worker guy named Jesus, right? And he's like, consider the lilies. Gentlemen, don't raise your hands in your home. How many of you have had like, I'm going to wake up this morning, I'm just going to have like a lily day. I'm going to ponder the lilies. Everyone, Jason just raised his hand. That's why I kind of live Facebook Live, right? This just sounds weird. It's like fear, anxiety, lilies. Right? And then you're like, Jesus, wait, nasty bird or pretty flower? Which one? Okay? Which one? The text says, it goes on to say, how they grow, they neither toil nor spin. Lilies don't have fashion shows, right? But lilies look awesome. How many of us love spring? Lilies. Jason raises his hand against spring. Lilies. The flowers come in the spring and you're like, especially Minnesota, right? Oh, winter was terrible. But the lilies remind us how beautiful spring is, right? And the lilies are an inanimate object, right? They're not freaked out. The lilies aren't like, does this petal make my butt look big? Right? Like, they're not anxiety-ridden. They're not freaked out, okay? They neither toil nor spin. Jesus again talking. Yet I tell you, even Solomon was a very rich, wise king from the Old Testament, in all his glory was not arrayed as well as these. That's amazing. But, anytime it says the Bible, you should pay attention. If God so clothes the grass, which is alive in the field today, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you? O ye O you of little faith. Jesus is saying your dad is a good dad. He will take care of you. The Bible says, do not seek what you are to eat or drink. Okay? Coffee, good coffee. Wine, good wine. Water, bottled water, triple filtered, quadruple filtered water, right? That's not what he's talking about, okay? The text says, nor be worried, for all the nations of the world seek after these things. And your Father knows that you need them. Your Father knows you need clothes, food, and drink. It is not a sin to have and enjoy them. It is a sin to let them dominate your life so much that it causes you anxiety. And then what does Jesus say? Jesus says, instead, seek his kingdom. Whose kingdom? God's kingdom, right? Because God's kingdom, we know, is a kingdom that never ends. Seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. These are the blessings, these are the benefits, these are the bonuses, the perks, okay? Fear not, there it is again, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. That's amazing. Right? Fear not. Why? You're the little flock. We're the little flock. And you're like, oh man, God looks at us like baby lambs. That's fine. Then he says, fear not. Because why? It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Jesus is saying, I have a message from God, and he says, don't be afraid. Jesus isn't saying in this passage, be tough, pull up your bootstraps, and you'll be fine. What is he saying? You have a Father who loves you, and he happens to be the king of the universe. You'll be all right. You'll be all right. Generally speaking, when the Bible says fear not, it then tells you who God is. Go study that this week. The character and the nature of God always comes after fear not, right? Fear not. For it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Because who God is to you changes how you live and why and how you worship him. I love that Jesus is always honest, right? Life is scary. You're not going to make it unless you're with the Father. And when you're with the Father, you'll be fine. Oh. All of a sudden, my fears shift from fear to my Father. Because my dad is much bigger than my enemies. My dad is much bigger than a pandemic. My dad is much bigger than if I'm going to eat tomorrow, right? Because my dad loves me, and he's a good dad, and he's generous, and he wants to take care of me. That makes a big difference, church, doesn't it? A big difference. Lastly, Jesus is going to stun us with something, again, unexpected. Jesus is going to tell us something. Jesus is the most, I love it about him, he's the most unpredictable teacher in the world, the history of the world. Jesus is going to tell us to give our best. And I believe that faith is write this down, faith is an internal conviction that leads to an external action. It just is. It's what you believe that results in how you behave and how you live your life. So if you're saying and agreeing with what I'm saying so far, look at what Jesus says in the text. Sell your possessions and give to the needy. Provide yourselves with money bags that do not grow old, with the treasures in heaven that does not fail, where no thief approaches it and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. How many of you know your life follows your money? Where does your money go this morning? Odds are your money goes to fears. Your security, so it goes to a home. You want comfort, so it goes to entertainment. You want status, so it goes to possessions. You want approval, so it goes to clothes. You want friends, so it goes to gifts. And God is saying here, give. Simply give. If you really believe, Jesus is challenging us in this passage, if you really believe that God, that the Father is a generous king, give your best. We call it first fruits, right? Don't give your worst. And some of you are saying, that's a really great verse. Sell your possessions and give to the needy, right? I have some junk I want to get rid of. Junk, right? That's a great idea. I mean, I have like junk must mean garage sale in Greek. I can't wait. Like junk must mean like give to Salvation Army all the crap that I don't want in my house. What does the text say? Give good things. Take something you worked very hard for and give it away. Take something that actually pains you to lose and give it away. Find someone who is in need, and there's a lot right now, right? And don't give garbage, give good things. The Bible, I believe, right, says, for God so loved the world that he what? He gave. And he gave his most prized possession, Jesus, okay? The gift that the Father gives to each and every single one of us is none other than the life, death, burial, resurrection, the righteousness, the salvation of Jesus, right? The second member of the Trinity, the Son of God. God chose because he loves us, and he chose, all caps, right, to give his best. We need to give our best. When we give our best, God is not taking our stuff. Remember, he's taking our stress. It is a joy to give. It is a joy to be generous. Giving reorients our hearts and our minds and our lives and our eyes away from ourselves. Giving good gifts, first fruits, good things, it allows us to get to know the Father better. It allows us to get to know and love others better. And Jesus here with our possessions is saying, what you really have, at the end of the day, is a heart problem. And just dealing with the heart problem will not be sufficient until you've dealt with your wealth problem, your possession problem, your fear problem, your anxiety problem. Jesus is giving us a financial principle for generous giving. And some of you are like, there it is. Church planner asking for money. I knew it was coming, right? Fear not. In the midst of a pandemic, fear not. God doesn't just want you to tithe, to give your first fruits to him, right? But he doesn't want you to fear. He doesn't want you to have anxiety. He doesn't want you to have stress, because all your stress is connected to your stuff and your money. So when you give, you're actually giving your stress to him, and you're giving to others to further the mission and the ministry of God. That's amazing. That should encourage you. Again, I'm going to continue to encourage you guys during this season, because I am more positive than I have ever been. And those of you that know me well are like, yeah, right. We are doing more ministry now than we've ever done as a baby church plant. If you're a follower of Jesus, let me remind you that your Father is a rich and a generous King who will not let you go without need. What about want? I can't help you on that one. You'll get some of the stuff you want. He will not let you go without need. If he takes care of a flower and a nasty bird, he'll take care of you. Your Father's kingdom, pay attention to me when I say this, your Father's kingdom has nothing to fear. Nothing. I joked about it last week, but I think about it every single moment of every day, right? Because of what we're in. Jesus is not sitting at the right hand of the Father going, geez, God, what's next? When do the churches get to start meeting again? Like, oh, they're still not going to play sports? Like, do you know what you're doing over here? God is not fearful right now. God has no lack. Your Father has proven faithful to do, like, over and over, and he will continue to do so. He will take care of you. And your Father asks you to be generous as an act of what? Faith. Why? Because one of the ways the Father feeds his little flock is through you. And by you, right, not giving good gifts or gifts at all, whether it's possessions or monetary, like money value, you're hurting the cause of feeding the little flock. And too many Christians in America and in this world do that on a weekly basis. Because I'm in the middle of a crisis, so I have to hoard everything. Toilet paper, right? Like, hot dogs were gone when I tried to go get groceries for my family the other day. Like what in the world, okay? You hoard everything because you're afraid, so I can't give, even though now, more than ever, is the time to give, because the needs have never been higher. But sometimes, the Father feeds and clothes others through his little sons and daughters, through his kids. And I do believe this, okay? We're in a wonderful season. This is fantastic. Like, everyone's broke, nobody's getting everything, and, like, everyone's freaked out. This is fantastic. We have an opportunity that we've never had. The church has an opportunity to reach more people than we have ever reached. I do believe God is in the midst of trying to reorient our minds and our lives so that he can start a revival. I believe that. And some of you are like, I don't have money right now. Yeah, but you got a lot of stuff. And you probably have a lot more money than you think, too. So have less. Give it away. Give some of your stuff away. Sell some stuff. Give the money away. Be generous. Okay? Pick someone who has a need, right? Not just some nameless, faceless, poor person. Because that's what we do as a church a lot. Like, I'll just put it in the offering box, and then, like, I'll just let them filter the money to whoever needs it. I know you all know someone right now. single mom, unemployed dad, right? Just give it. See what happens in your heart. See what happens with your fears. Think about it. See what happens with your anxieties. We're in a great season. The world is like teed up for an opportunity for the sons and daughters, for the bride of Christ to just meet needs and to give. I believe that with all my heart. So I want to try something this morning as we close. The needs have never been greater. I can give you stories of people meeting Jesus in the last 3 weeks since this all went online. I can give you stories about how we're sending Bibles to Kenya, right? From an email that I received from someone I'd never heard of. The need is greater than ever. So we're going to try this morning. We respond, right? We took communion last week as a church. We're going to do that every other week like we used to, okay? Now, does that seem a little weird? Yes. I want you to try something else. Because most churches, we're actually in the minority. Most churches are very heavy online giving and not Sunday morning giving. I want you to try something. We're going to collect an offering in a moment online. And then if you're like, well, I just prefer to write my check. Okay, when the Spirit moves you during the songs, just like you would do if you were here, go online and give. Write your check and give. I want to give more to our community right now. There are needs that I want Redemption Church to be able to meet, and we can't meet them right now. So be generous. Give good things. Give God things, like big things. You should be excited right now. I hope you're jumping up and dancing and doing what I did with Callie's song.
It was awesome.
Like, we should be excited more than ever to serve our community who is fearful and they're afraid, and the only reason they leave their house is to get liquor. Because, hey, that sounds fun, right? Because they're afraid. And Jesus is asking you, he's asking each and every single one of us this morning to be generous, not only with our money, not only with our prayers, not only with our time, right? Pick up a phone call and call someone. Just call someone and encourage them, because we should be encouraged. Let's pray. Father God, thank you so much that you are ruling and reigning and more powerful than you have ever been. Jesus, you remain the same today, yesterday, and tomorrow, and we are excited for what you are doing in the midst. In the midst of all of this, we are excited that you are a God who is in total control, who is not afraid, who none of this is surprising, who knows already the exact date, time, hour that we'll hear on the news, hey, church, you can get back together. Hey, we can go back outside and not be 6 feet away from someone that we like or love, right? Hey, this is awesome. You know exactly what it is. Jesus, thank you for those people in our church family who have stayed connected, who have continued to give, who are continuing to serve behind the scenes, because there's a lot going on behind the scenes that people aren't seeing. God, thank you that in the midst of all this, you're having people meet you who are getting saved. We're excited that when we get back together that we're going to have a ton more baptisms than we had planned. God, thank you for loving us. Thank you for giving us good things, not bad things. Thank you that Jesus went to the cross and died for us, each and every single one of us. God, I pray if someone doesn't know you this morning that they would hear this and they would reach out on the email or the phone call and hit us up, and we would love to walk them through what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus. God, now we respond in praise, in worship, in giving, in just adoration for who you are. We pray this all in your name. Amen.
love and righteousness, scorned by the ones he came to save. Till on the cross as Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. For every sin on him was laid. Here in the death of Christ I live. There in the crowd his body lay, light of the world by darkness flame. Then bursting forth in glorious day, up from the grave he rose again. And as he stands in victory, since death has lost its grip on me, for I am his and he is mine, bought with the precious blood of Christ. No cares in life, no fear in death. This is the power of Christ in me. From life's first cry to final breath, Jesus commands my destiny. No power of hell, no scheme of man can ever pluck me from his hand. Till he returns or calls me home, here in the power of Christ I'll stand. Till he returns or calls me home, here in the power of Christ I'll stand. This is my worship, this is my offering. In every moment, I withhold nothing. I'm learning to trust you, even when I can't see it. And even in suffering, I have to believe it. If you say it's wrong, then I'll say no. If you say release, I'm letting go. If you're in it with me, I'll begin. And when you say to jump, I'm diving in. If you say be still, then I will wait. If you say to trust, I will obey. I don't wanna follow my own way. I'm done chasing feelings, Spirit. It felt like a burden, but once like a grasping, and you took me further than I was asking. And simply to see you, and it's worth it all. My life is an altar, Let your fire fall. If you say it's wrong, then I'll say no. If you say release, I'm letting go. If you're in it with me, I'll be here. When you say the jump, I'm diving in. If you say be still, then I will wait. If you say to trust, I will obey. Teach me how to find your way. I'm done chasing feelings. Spirit. What is all I've have to believe is to bring water from the rock, satisfy my thirst, love me up even when I don't remember. You remind me of my words. Don't trust my treading in my thoughts. I've laid down everything, 'cause you're all that I want. Standing on my knees, this is the cup you have for me. Even when it don't make sense, I'm gonna let your spirit lead. Gonna let your spirit lead. Gonna let your spirit lead. I'm gonna let your spirit lead. If you say it's wrong, then I'll say no. If you say release, I'm letting go. If you're in it with me, I'll begin. And when you say to jump, I'm diving in. If you say be still, then I will wait. If you say to trust, I will obey. You're the only truth, the life, the way. I'm done chasing feelings, spirit. Spirit, lead me. Spirit, lead me. Spirit, lead me. a shout, ragged voice, and go bravely into battle, knowing he has won the war. It is banished, lift your head, and weep no more. There's no sacrifice to offer, and there's no penance to complete. Freely drink of living water, without running up and feast. It is finished, he has done it, let your weary heart rejoice. Our redemption is accomplished, raise a shout with ragged voice, and go bravely into battle, knowing he has won the war. It is finished, lift your head, let every sinner rejoice. Hear the dying victors cry, raise up your voice, sing it out through the sky. It is finished, he has done it, let your weary heart rejoice. Our redemption is accomplished, raise a shout, ragged voice, and go bravely into battle, knowing he has won the war. It is finished, lift your head, and weep no more. Dear Jesus, we just thank you for our opportunity to be here today. We thank you that that it's finished, that we get to go into this world knowing that you have won the war already, and that we get to let go of our stress and our anxiety and our fears and give them to you. And you know exactly what that process is, God, because you came down on earth and you did that yourself. And we're just so in awe of who you are, God, and the way that you care for us, and the way that you will always take care of us. And we just thank you for being the God that you are.